Betty Marie was born June 28, 1933 in Snohomish, Washington, to Melvin Daniel Lowry and Anna Christine Hammer Lowry. She was the youngest of their 5 children, 3 daughters, and 2 sons. The family lived on some acreage outside of town near Little Bear Creek. Betty attended school at Cathcart Elementary and Snohomish High School. Tragedy struck when Melvin died near the age of 50, which led to young Mel dropping out of high school to provide for the family. With the oldest daughters grown and gone, Betty left school as well to work at her first job at Woolworth's Drug in Seattle. Betty married her first husband, Dale Heitman, and their marriage resulted in her first son, Kenneth. Later, Betty married Dale Byron Johnson, and together they had 3 children, Ronald, the oldest, Randall, the middle son, and Terry Marie, the daughter. Betty was a devoted mother and homemaker. Family was the most important thing in her life, and she cherished every moment of it. This inevitably led her to being a doting grandmother to her 14 grandchildren. From April 2000, she was an active member of her Christian congregation in Granite Falls, Washington, and spent many years preaching and teaching kingdom messages. With her many friends, such as Becky Erickson, her daughter-in-law, Terry Johnson, and many others. The next adventure came in 2006 when she moved to Butte, Montana with her son Randall and his family. She loved having the mountains and the beautiful scenery all around her. Her favorite activities were spontaneous drives with friends far out into the country to find old homesteads, marvel at animals. On the surface, Betty was a classic, sweet grandmother. Gave everything she had to family. Betty loved tending to her garden, serving big meals, baking all kinds of treats, sewing beautiful quilts, playing card games. She would play tricks on her friends and tease her grandkids. When I would go to her house after school, she always had my favorite, a hot pastrami sandwich. And we would watch the Golden Girls together, and she would always get us toys to play with in her creek in the back of her property. Betty was loved by all who met her, and in turn she showed love to all whom she met. She always put the needs of others, especially those of her family, ahead of herself. She set the example of forgiving freely, showing hospitality. Betty will be remembered for her kind spirit as well as her sense of humor. Even in her last days, when I went to see her, even though she had much trouble remembering, she would have a smile, positive attitude, and always reply with something to the effect of, "Well, that's nice, dear." Betty is preceded in death by her parents Melvin and Anna Lowry, her siblings Jean, Mel, and Richard. She is survived by her sister Margie Barker, sister-in-law Pam Lowry, her children Kenny Heitman and his wife Marcy, Ron Johnson and his wife Kathy, Randy Johnson, and Terry Marie Craven, as well as 14 grandchildren and 14 great-grandchildren. Unconditional love is almost non-existent. She gave me that gift. She cherished family, unity, and always having her door open to her family, no matter what. To honor her life, I will keep trying to keep her family united, no matter what, because it's what she would have wanted. So to honor her, my only daughter has Betty as one of her middle names. When it's your last child, people tend to cram in all the names they can. The most sincerest form of honor is imitation. So let's owe honor to Betty Marie Johnson by showing forgiveness to each other, genuine kindness to one another, and never allowing anyone or anything from separating the bond of friends and family. Rest in peace, my grandma, Betty Marie Johnson. Here's just a few moments I captured on video of my grandma Betty over the last few years. I based my life off my grandma. I've basically been copying her. So grandma drinks white Zinfandel. I drink white Zinfandel. Slumlord. I just trying to be like my grandma Betty.
But every word was right on the money, and I got you smiling, honey, right back. Where that came from? Well, you know I'm just having fun, seriously.
These are the world's laziest dogs, Graham. Go night nights.
Lay down.
Graham, toss those big dogs in the sink. Give them a bath. Toss them in the shower. Just pick them up. Graham, whose underwear is this? Is this my dad's? Me and Graham and Betty are the only Teamsters in the family, right, Graham? Can you jump in the snowplow truck? I don't want to go outside. I'm going to hang out with the pups here, and you go jump in that big snowplow truck.
Mine was every growed up like that. So far, that's it.
All right, Jack. Stabilize first, now walk. Walk, 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 walk. A little blurry, but that's my Grandma Betty that he's walking to. And each of my boys, to help with their first steps, would borrow their great Grandma Betty's cane. Stand him up one more time. Have him finish the walk. Finish the walk. Now just a few brief stories about Grandma Betty from people whose lives she has touched.
A really special time in my life was when I worked at a metal casting facility. They wanted you there at 6 a.m. sharp, and a couple of days into the job, I noticed that Grandma would wake up at about 4:30, and I would wake up to the sound of sizzling bacon and scrambled eggs being made up. And she would knock on my door and say, "Honey, it's time to get up and go to work." And she would start we would start the day eating breakfast together, and she'd make me a little lunch and then send me on my way. And that was for about 6 months. We got to have breakfast every single morning together. And I remember we got to play cards a lot together. I remember that we played hearts, and we played this other game, golf, with other family members. And she would also listen to a lot of music, and she would play big band music. And it made me love big band. And there was a couple occasions when I got to dance with Grandma during this time. And so that was a time where we got to be really close, and we spent a lot of time together, and it was really fun. I really, really loved that.
So for as long as I can remember, Graham and I would argue about who loved each other more. When I was little, I would say, "Oh, I love you more, Graham," and she said, "No, I love you more," and back and forth. And when I was a teenager, I spent most of my time with Graham and her friends, especially Arlene. And well, I'd say, "Oh, I love you more, Graham," and she'd say, "Oh, no, you don't. I've told you 100 times." And Arlene would chime in, and she'd say, "Oh, I'm gonna have to call the lawyers to decide this once and for all." Yeah. And the last time I saw Graham, we were just sitting together, and I said, "I love you more, Graham." She didn't really remember most, but she smiled and said no. So we might never know who loved each other more, but our fight's not over. I plan on telling her again next time I see her I loved Graham more than she loved me.
Being in Butte, I was away from my own family. You find similarities in the new family that you get. And she reminded me a lot of my own grandmother in the sense that she didn't need to buy your love. She welcomed you into her own space. She made you feel immediately safe and loved and cared for.
So whenever we would be on the bus going home from school, we would pass Grandma's house on the way. And it was a really special day when the bus was finally slowing down right in front of Grandma's house. And we would get to run down her hill, and Grandma would greet us usually with some snickerdoodle cookies or peanut butter cookies, which was always my favorite. And we would get to go and play in the creek just down below her house. She would always buy us plenty of tubes and water toys to go play in the creek and throw clay at each other as kids do. And I remember so many nights when she would tuck all of us in, but she had 3 other bedrooms in her house. This is quite a bit. So each of us kids had our own rooms if we wanted. But I have so many memories of Grandma tucking me in, and I would hear the little electric clock on her nightstand whirring around, and then she would say, "See you in the morning, doot doot." And that continued. I would say that to her when I got to live with her when I was 20, and I would say that anytime I ever could. If we were leaving her house for the night to go back home, I would always say that to her. But lots of wonderful days at Grandma's house. Grandma Betty was always good about feeding her grandkids. One time I went with Grandma when she was running some errands in Everett, Washington, and she took me to a Chinese restaurant called the King Buffet. And I was immediately hooked. I loved Chinese food from that point on. And any other time that I would get to go with her, I would insist, I would ask, "Can we please go to the King Buffet?" Time and time again. And she never said no. She never suggested, "Oh, hey, we eat there all the time. Do you want to go to another restaurant, honey? Or maybe we can try this other food." She always took me there. And it was so much fun. And so over the years, we got to go to many, many different Chinese restaurants all over the place. And I remember about 10 years ago, I took Grandma, it was just me and her. I drove her to Eastern Washington for some business, I'm pretty sure. I can't quite recall. But the thing that sticks out of my mind is we had a wonderful road trip, and we got to go and stop and see the Grand Coulee Dam. And then on the way back through Coeur d'Alene, we stopped at a Chinese restaurant that she would go to with her friend on occasion. And it's just a great time. And I love that has been a consistent through line. My grandma has always fed me my whole life. She's been a wonderful, wonderful doting grandma who especially expressed her love with food.